Tell us where the lowest point was. There surely must have been points in the race where you felt like you couldn't have gone on or didn't want to proceed because it was so challenging and such a tight time schedule. What was your low point during that event?
Well, you actually climb a mountain in the middle of the night. So I remember climbing the top of it's Parnatha. I remember climbing the top of this mountain, and it was so windy up there. To the point, I had a jacket on, a shell. It was still pretty warm, but it was the wind was howling. And I remember looking at these two guys that were kind of huddled around a fire, and the fire was just going. It was just coals at that point because there was no way to keep it lit in the flames. And I thought this race is, this situation is desperate for these guys being up on this, this mountainous peak with this wind that's going to go on all night, and my situation not so much better. I just remember being really low at that point, like kind of life is is a struggle and you lose.
Wow. And then the finish is also quite interesting because you push through that low point, you were able to finish, but there's not necessarily a finish line that you get to. Can you tell us about the finish and what that felt like?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you've seen the movie 300, you know who the king of Sparta was at the time, Leonidas or Leonidas. And when you finish the race, you basically reach up and you touch his bronze feet. It's a huge statue in the main square of Sparta, which Sparta is actually a place in Greece as well. So that's how the race ends when you touch his feet. And it's spine chilling. I mean, I touched his feet and started to weep. My knees buckled, and you watch anyone coming up and touching his feet. Some people collapse, some people cry, some people laugh, but it's just a glorious moment if you can make it there within 36 hours and finish the race.
Well, you mentioned finishing the race, and yeah, the battle of attrition that we mentioned earlier. How many people did finish the event the year that you did it? I want to say it was nearly 50-50 from what I recall.
Yeah, I think it was about half that year. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a high dropout rate
And,
for
and you know, and these are the best athletes in the world too. It's not like, there's 50 slackers that kind of just gave up. I mean, these are
right.
people that know how to fight and have been there before because, again, as I said, that just to get into this race, the qualifying standards, what you have to do at a 100-mile race, at other distances to even get in is really high.
Yeah, the qualification standards. I mean, you described, I believe it was like an American champion in one of the events that passed you early, but then he was not able to continue on at some point. So that tells you how difficult that race was.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no certainty with this race. I don't care. It humbles you. I don't care if you're a champion, or someone who's just new to the sport. There's no mercy. This race, eats its young, if you will.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, okay, this is in your book. You say this is the part where this story should end. You did all of this amazing research. You learned about, the history of Phidippides and this amazing run that he was able to do. You were able to replicate it. You accomplished your mission. You did it as authentically as you possibly could. And this is where the story should end. But you have a bit of the story to go, and we go back to what happened with Phidippides arriving at Sparta. Can you tell us a little bit about what next unfolded with that story?
Yes, I will. I mean, he got to Sparta. He made it, and he pronounced to the men of Sparta that the Athenians were uh, requesting them to come to their assistance as quickly as they could because of the Persian invasion. The Spartans said, "Okay, that's you're our brethren, you're our fellow countrymen. We'll come to your aid." And Phidippides said, "That's great. Let's go." And they said, "There's one slight caveat. We can't leave. Our religion forbids us for leaving for battle until there's a full moon, and that's not for another 6 days." So, being the trained hemodromi that he was, Philip decided to get up the next morning and run back to Athens to tell his countrymen the Spartans are coming. They're just delayed for 6 days, and that's exactly what he did. So he had a hallucination with the god Pan, and if you know anything about mythology, Pan is his upper torso is a man, his lower torso is a goat. You've probably seen the cartoons or something for Pan. He had a hallucination in the middle of the night that Pan told him, the Athenians are not honoring me the way they should. You're becoming slackers, if you will. Pick it up, have that discipline that I have, and I'll support you. So it could be the first ever recorded running related hallucination. And this is Herodotus, so he's writing in 400 BC. But Phidippides went to the battlefield and told the other Athenians, the Spartans are coming in 6 days. But he also said, let's be true to Pan, because if we get into a fight, Pan will instill panic and pandemonium in the enemy. So that's how the story was told.
Wow, that's amazing. As somebody who probably in modern time took yourself as close to feeling the way that he did, doing the event as authentically as you possibly could. Again, lots of things are different now. Everything's modernized. You're running on roads. You had decent shoes. Aid stations were there, navigation aids. But again, in my opinion, pure Greek blood running through your veins and doing this event, having gone through that event, you must have put yourself in his shoes, knowing that you just accomplished that amazing feat. You delivered the message that you need to deliver, but now it's just as important for you to get back as quickly as you got there and to take a quick night's sleep and turn right back around and run back. How would you have felt being in his shoes?
It's hard to project, because the only thing I kept thinking about is if my family was at stake. He was a bit of an older hemo than me. He was in like an elder statesman, kind of at the end of his career. So he probably had family, and thinking that he's running, to save not only his family, all of his Athens, his city, his home, everything. He's not just running, to try to set a record or try to, get in before the cutoff. I mean, this guy is running to save everything he holds most dear. And the stakes get really high when you start trying to think about that. And you can only think about it. You can't really project what it must feel like for him to know he had to succeed. Like failure meant probably the death, not only the death of him, but the death of everything he cherished.
Yeah, wow. And you do such a good job at this in your book. I love your line, like historians don't like to speculate about, what would have happened if the Athenians would have lost, but I'm not a historian, so I get to do whatever I want. Can you tell us about some of the implications in modern times? Like we think about this as happening, 2,500 years ago. It doesn't really matter today, but if they would have lost that battle, if Phidippides hadn't have done what he done and delivered the message, can you tell us what some of the possible implications could have been?
Yeah, I mean, Athens was just developing this idea of democracy. So, rule by the people. And if, one of the things that the Persians wanted to do is put an end to this idea, because they didn't want it spreading. And the Persian Empire was vast. I mean, there was about 2 million people projected at that time in the Persian Empire, and there was 10,000 Athenians. So, they just said let's nip this idea of democracy in the bud before it even can take root or anything. So that would have changed the course of history in so many different ways. It's hard to project how history, if we would have eventually come to democracy, but we know that, Plato, who was a big proponent of democracy and wrote, the Republic, he came about 80 years later. So if the Persians had been in control of Athens at the time, we would have no Plato. Socrates was his mentor. We would have no Socrates. We would have no Aristotle. And these are all the pennants of Western civilization. The way we think is so profoundly influenced by those three men. We don't even know. Most people, I mean, I know because I studied classics. Most people don't even know that, kind of like the way we conduct our life is because of what these three guys thought about. So, had that not occurred, who knows what the world would be like today? But it would be different, that's for sure.
That's incredible. And then going back to Phidippides, if we look at all the running that he did, so if I understand it right, it was about 153 miles to Sparta, 153 miles back, and then an additional 25 miles to Marathon. And then where he fought, we believe that he fought with all the other, warriors, and then returned home and then passed away. Do we have most of that story correct?
Yeah, you do. I mean, you gloss over a lot of interesting facts, I think. One, the Battle of Marathon, like we're running geeks and we're, endurance sports geeks. But if you're like a historian of battles, like marathon is one of the greatest battles that ever existed because of the techniques the Athenians used to defeat the Persians. Yeah, as I said, they were badly outnumbered, and to move the book forward quickly, the Spartans did not deploy they deployed 6 days, but the battle had already taken place. The Athenians decided that they couldn't wait for 6 days, that every day the Persians were reinforcing their position, so they had to attack. So they attacked basically by charging the Persians, who were used to using what they call the longbow. The Persians were the first people to invent a bow and arrow. And the Athenians realized these bow and arrows would devastate them if they just stood back and tried to withstand this barrage of of arrows. So they charged at the Persians. The Persians had never been charged uh, like that before, and they somehow defeated the Persians. So the battle itself and the tactics the Greeks used were really quite clever.